May I kindly request the speaker for technical session 3, Dr. Sai Shruti Iyer, consultant microbiologist at Dr. Lal Path Labs, Hyderabad, to take over the stage, please. Thank you, madam.
And I would like to thank the organizers for organizing such an innovative conclave. Dr. Ranga Reddy sir for giving me this opportunity, Dr. Mustafa sir for introducing me to IFCAI. The topic given to me is opportunities of strengthening surveillance in the backdrop of COVID-19. So it's a very subjective topic, I'd say, that every one of us, I think, would have a different view to how we would look at COVID as an opportunity to move forward and have and how we look at the after COVID life. So I'm just, as a microbiologist who's been dealing with the virus for the last 2 years, I'm just trying to portray how I see COVID as an opportunity and how we can strengthen the surveillance and the IPC practices and use it further, just not to control COVID, but also the other infective problems that are prevailing in the globe. So while I was preparing for this talk, I came across a paper by the University of Florida. The Department of Pediatrics has done a study which is called as the tale of two viruses. So let me just briefly take you through the tale of two viruses. Yeah, so the first thing that you should start off thinking is, was COVID really a mishap? So Ivor Wickman in 1905 discovered that a limping disease in men was basically contagious, and this disease was polio. Later in 1910, we discovered that vaccines are helpful to cure polio, and believe me, polio, as we all know, was there in the world since the 1400s. So we all knew that there is a limping disease, but after 400, 500 years that we came to know that it is contagious. And in 1952 and 1961, the famous Salk and Sabin came into picture, and India saw its first case, its last case of polio on 13th of January 2011. Is it food for thought? Let me take you to the next hero of our story, the tale of two viruses, COVID-19. So 2019, December, Wuhan sees its first case, and 1 year later in 2020, WHO releases emergency use of vaccinations against the COVID pandemic. 2019, September, October, we already had Moderna and other vaccines around the globe which were in its final stages of phases of their trials. So imagine how vigilant the whole world was. We all sitting here, we've seen those 2 years, and we've all been really very active in the healthcare setup, doing the facilities, the government, and most importantly, the public. So this kind of vigilant behavior, I think, would have taken the healthcare fraternity. If had it not been COVID, the healthcare fraternity would have taken a very long time to reach such a level that we've already reached in 2 years. I think thank you to COVID. And what is the reason that we've reached? Okay, we are not yet, we can't call ourselves free of COVID, but yes, we've controlled it to a decent level. And what is the reason that we performed fairly well in COVID? So first would be continuing treatment services. Although we could not meet both the ends very well, but then yes, we have treated many of our people. The kind of new virus which had come to the whole world, we've performed fairly well in COVID, and we were providing continuing treatment services. There was community participation. If you go out on the roads, people were carrying hand sanitizers and they were guiding each other about masks. So yes, community participation has definitely been played a very big role for what stage we stand in our COVID scenario today. Then advocacy and social mobilization of behavioral change. I think this has been this has played a major role, that public is finally taking care of their own health. I think that is one major milestone that we've achieved, that, you know, a man would reach hospitals when the severest of symptoms would appear, but today he's coming to the hospital even with the slightest of cough or cold. So I think that is a major thing that we've got with COVID. And aggressively minimizing infection, like Sir was talking about the Kerala model of trace, track, test, and treat. So I think this has brought in patients closer to healthcare facilities, where we were using the cluster care method. the cluster care method, in which we would trace the primary case, the index case, and then we would trace the secondary cases as well. So I think this vigilant outreach program has also played a very vital role in controlling COVID and to bring the whole globe to a state of COVID where we are. When we started in March in India, when it started in March 2020, we never thought we would be able to reach this place where we could still think of getting cured with COVID. We were all so scared. And one more thing, so one more thing that I want to say is the scientific milestones that have been vigorously and the vigilance of the scientists throughout the globe. We were talking in the morning about the great scientists and the work that has been done in the research field, maybe the treatment or the vaccines. So I think that has played a major role, research is still going on, and I think that is what has brought us up with the vaccine and the kind of cure that we're looking forward to. But keeping all that, coming back to square one, is it really a win-win? So I would just, in the next few slides, I would tell you a few scenarios which are also thoughts to be pondered upon. So this was a study by Rachna Phadke, and it said that yeah, so I think the highlight is not coming this slide. Yeah, so there was a study by Rachna Phadke where they say how India did not have enough healthcare resources to fight dengue amidst the COVID-19. So this was a major emergency that happened in Delhi and many other places where our healthcare resources were all exhausted because we were busy fighting COVID. There was another study. Yeah, so again, Zika virus again was the same situation, and many other countries in the Southeast Asian region where tuberculosis was a problem. In Peru, there was problem of bubonic plague in the Madagascar. There were problems about Ebola coming up in Africa. So just not India, the whole globe had that problem that because we were busy fighting COVID, we could not address other diseases efficiently. Coming to this is reopening has caused low levels of adenovirus infection. So post-lockdown, when people started coming out, many other emergent infections came up, like the adenovirus and other viral infections. So definitely this was also posing a problem during the pandemic. Again, a study in Cambridge said that we all know whenever the immunity comes down, latent infections like herpes rise. So there was a rise in herpes cases post-COVID. It doesn't end here. We all know, so media's favorite, the black fungus. So according to CDC, injudicious use of antimicrobials and prolonged hospital stays, decreased immunity, all this led to development of rare fungal diseases like Candida auris, invasive coccidiomycosis, mucormycosis, candidemia, and India definitely had a lot of problem of mucor coming up throughout. We were seeing in media the whole black fungus buzz that happened on media. So I think we did neglect these outcomes when we were busy dealing with COVID. Again, all the microbiologists here would agree with me that AMR has cropped up as a major problem during COVID, and because of every patient coming inside the hospital or say over-the-counter medication, some WhatsApp message would come about azithromycin being helpful and patient would just go and buy some azithromycin over the counter. So this has not just caused antimicrobial resistance in individuals but also caused environmental pollution and then led to development of AMR strains. These are super resistant bugs and we have to deal with it now. And then there was a very sad thing, that is the less compliance to healthcare. Around WHO report says that there were 1.4 million people who did not get their ATT course completed, and there were 500 million deaths due to TB because they could not reach the healthcare facilities. The neglected tropical diseases, again, the programs have been postponed now. The targets, the global 2020 targets have now been postponed. So compliance to healthcare has become a major problem. So this is also one study where they've shown how compliance to healthcare has reduced for various other diseases. So how I have understood the whole scenario of COVID-19 is, so COVID, we had a good recovery rate, speedy development of vaccines were there, we have performed fairly well. But what? Behind our back, there were a lot of other problems cropping up, and we, like the horse puts up blinders and can see only one thing, we could see only COVID, and vigilant surveillance let loose caused other infections, complications to therapy, re-emergent infections, and antimicrobial resistance. So I think we need to bring all that from our back in the front line and keep the COVID perspective as a curtain. COVID is not just bad. COVID has taught us many things, like I said in the first slide. So we have to bring all that we neglected in the front line, and that is the need of the hour. Whatever we've learned from COVID, we have to utilize that in the other infectious diseases and the IPC surveillance per se. And we have to move forward to fill in the potholes that were created in these last 2 years at the IPC front, and also keep on fighting COVID till it ends. So we have to expand our views, and how? So COVID has taught us all this. Like we were talking about the telemedicine revolution, I think we never thought that one day would come when you would sit with your doctor on a video call and discuss your disease. So I think the telemedicine revolution is a brilliant thing that COVID has given us, and patient is now willing to get his telemedicine consultation done. And that is a very good thing, because we do not, that is a very good way to bring patients closer to healthcare facilities at their own comfort levels. Then we have delivery of healthcare. We all know that the infrastructure, the healthcare infrastructure, there's another point. So it has grown up massively, where we were talking about 4 ventilators per hospital. Today we have 40. Madam was talking about creating negative pressure rooms and anti-rooms. So we are all ready. We have that in mind. And I think healthcare delivery has become really vigilant, and it has increased 4-fold during the whole COVID pandemic, because we were managing such a great emergency for 2 years. So I think that is in place. Then patient perception. This is, I think, the key to all the surveillance that we aim to achieve in the next coming years, because patients are now interested in healthcare. So I think that is a very great opportunity that COVID has taught us. Then medical education. 2 years back, when I started testing COVID, I think people will agree with me here that we did not have technicians who were trained to do RT-PCR. We had hardly 2 people, and also the medical colleges were not having functional PCR laboratories. But today, if you see in the city, there are hundreds of laboratories. Every corner, there is a small laboratory starting up with RT-PCR. So that is how our technicians and medical students are now trained. And even apart from that, if you see multitasking, every person knows how to do CPR in the hospital. So I think that has brought up, medical education has become very strong in these 2 years when it is concerning to emergencies. Then research and publications, definitely ICMR is encouraging research publications like anything. We've come up with the vaccines, we've come up with the treatments, we've come up with new sterilization machines and everything. So yes, research and publications definitely on the forefront. It is going at a very fast pace, and this is definitely an opportunity. So in the coming few slides, I will discuss how to correlate and how to combine surveillance with the opportunities that we've got from COVID. So basically, we have to have a systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of outcome-specific data for use in planning, implementing, and evaluating the public health services. Like we were talking that public health health is now the answer to get back to normalcy. And then we have to, any communicable disease surveillance will have 2 parts, early warning and program monitoring. So first is assessment of communicable disease risk to identify major public health threats. So in COVID, we all know that there was a massive task force which was put in COVID, and now with the decreasing cases, we have staff that can be used up into the statistical analysis of various other public health problems, right? And then we have the COVID model of trace, track, and test that can be used into other infectious diseases as well. We have the ongoing research projects We have to broaden up our views in the clinics, just not to COVID. Any cough is not COVID, is what we have to start thinking again. We have to think of all the infections per se, and we have to be vigilant when we are dealing with infections, even at the clinic, in the society, and that is how we can assess the communicable disease risk that is prevailing in the society. And if we do that, we can prioritize public health threats and ensure that surveillance is limited only to the problems that need our attention. For example, mucor. I would say mucor was definitely a problem in the society, definitely not just the media buzz, but we were facing mucor crisis. But if the media hype would have been a little towards the authenticity, we would not have so many over-the-counter amphotericin B used by the patients, and the antifungal resistance wouldn't have increased so much. So that is by statistical analysis and assessment of our problems that we can prioritize healthcare, and that is how we can give the feedback to the public that this is what you need to concentrate on when you are dealing with infections. Then assessment of the existing systems to review strengths and weaknesses and opportunities for strengthening the system. So we have to have public health communication should be available to all the people. People should be able to reach healthcare facilities not just for COVID but for all the infections, and we have to analyze what are our strengths and weaknesses to implement these activities in the right way. And like I said, that we have to turn our ID clinics into COVID clinics. Now the IPC surveillance, we all know about the HI surveillance that we do at our facilities. So the IPC surveillance can be established, can be strengthened by having a national IPC focal point, like we had national authorities looking after COVID, and we were all from every state reporting COVID to the national facilities. We could have that for IPC surveillance as well. So establishment of a national IPC focal point could be helpful. Multidisciplinary technical group for HI surveillance and IPC surveillance, and develop national strategic plan for HI surveillance. And this could be done in two ways. The national surveillance could be the timely data feedback to reduce HI and IMR, and guide IPC interventions and detect outbreaks. In one more thing that we could add with this is that today we have the HI surveillance in our facilities. We have an NABH, an audit, or say we do infections like infection control rounds. We could have a national feedback to our stakeholders and healthcare workers as to how they are performing at the national front. So like we were doing it for COVID, we can utilize this for our HI surveillance as well. So then there is also robust event-based surveillance mechanism that can be used by online content, radio broadcasts, and print media like we were doing in COVID. This can be definitely used for our other infectious diseases as well. So now one more thing, the basis of all the diagnostics and assessment is our laboratories. So COVID has given us this massive infrastructure when it comes to the diagnostic facilities as well. When we had started in 2020, there were hardly 14 labs. By the end of March, we had more than 100 VRDLs that were functional in most of the government colleges throughout the country. And by the end of 2020, there were more than 1,250 private labs that had joined hands. So that is the power of our diagnostic facilities that we have today. If we could bring down COVID rates from 4,000 to 500 per day per sample for RT-PCR, why can't it be done for hepatitis B and hepatitis C? That is where we need to work on. Our research projects are going on. If we could create vaccines, why can't we create cheaper diagnostic kits? We already have RT-PCR machines and technical staff in place. So that is how we need to strengthen our diagnostics. And then implementation of all the activities planned to strengthen the systems. We have funds. The government is putting in at least more funds than they were putting earlier. We have healthcare facilities in place. We have ongoing research projects. Again, coming back to the same thing that the government is vigilant. They say hit the iron when it is hot. So we need to get into flow. We have to streamline whatever practices we've been doing for COVID have to be streamlined for the other infectious diseases and the IPC surveillance. And then we have a very good thing that COVID has got us, that is e-clinics, reporting. We were reporting online, we were doing e-clinics, we were doing meetings online. So we have this online forum where we could bridge the gap between peripheries and the center. So I think that can be used. Now, monitoring progress in implementation. We know every surveillance has to be monitored well to know that what are the outcomes. So the real time, if you see on the ICMR website, you have a real time number of cases that are increasing in COVID, okay? Or if you open the COVID app, it keeps saying that so and so many people have been vaccinated. Imagine an app like COVID for methicillin resistant staph aureus, when the clinician sitting in this clinic comes to know that, so many MRSA is there, and he would then, I think his pen would stop when he writes a higher antibiotic. So I think we need to implement this for various other aspects as well to bring down the potholes that have created like AMR or re-emerging infections. So these are the indicators, the input indicators where we see how much staff is employed, the process indicators, the output indicators. Yeah, and then I just want to, these are the basis of surveillance system where we see how it is working. Impact indicators is something that I want to talk about here, where we see the case fatality rates and the morbidity patterns. Along with that, in COVID, we can add up the behavioral change patterns that has come up in the public. There was a study which said that the hand hygiene adherence rate has gone up to 56% post-COVID. So these are very easy impact indicators that can now be used for IPC surveillance, and we already have our HAI surveillance in place. We just need to implement and broaden our approach. So to summarize, the opportunities that we have are acute care monitoring, healthcare delivery, redeployment opportunities because we have multitaskers, maybe doctors or technicians. We have staff resilience. If they have worked in such an emergency for 2 years, they can help us out further as well. So that is what we need to utilize, and we need to channelize their energy and their knowledge in the right direction. Healthcare facilities, equipments, telemedicine, patient perception, and medical education are some of the opportunities that COVID has given us in a golden platter, and we just need to pick it up and start off and fill all the things we could not address in the last 2 years. We need to catch up, and we have to move at a faster pace. So to summarize, I would just say rationalizing and optimizing available resources with resilience shown on the coronavirus frontline during the crisis is the most important lesson learned, and that is the key to surveillance of infectious diseases. Thank you.
Have a huge round of applause, everyone.